In Final Fantasy XIV, the term casual simultaneously exists as a description of a person's time committed and off-the-cuff analysis of a player's gameplay ability, and finally as an all-encompassing insult when either of those factors fail to live up to the expectations of a judgmental party. But should a legitimate description and method of playing the game also be a synonym for an insufficient gamer? In this video, I'm analyzing the issues that arise when the multiple meanings of casual collide, causing confusion and consternation for the community. I'm Estar, healer main and Final Fantasy XIV endgame raider, and if you want more deep dives into obscure topics like this, hit that subscribe button below. I'll be making videos about healing, raiding, and how we can better communicate with each other, as well as live streaming Savage and Ultimate raids here on YouTube. Final Fantasy XIV is a game defined by casual play. Unlike other MMORPGs, it is not designed to be a massive grind or a major time sink, and Yoshi P himself has said to play other games between patch cycles so as to not burn out. So-called casual players make up the majority of the player base, and the game has a plethora of varied content designed specifically for them to enjoy. In the community, however, casual is used not only as an accurate assessment of a player's time commitment, but also as an admission of a shallower approach to gameplay or job functionality, or as a flat-out insult to lesser skilled players. Right from the start, that's a problem, because depending on the context, the term can have positive, neutral, or negative connotations. And let me be clear from the onset, there is absolutely nothing wrong with playing Final Fantasy XIV casually. Again, it's arguably designed to be played that way, but the sheer existence of the negative connotations lead people who would otherwise happily define their gameplay approach as casual to become uneasy with the term. It also drives a wedge between the so-called casual and raiding communities, leading to childish drama on Twitter, Reddit, and the official forums. Even among self-identified raiders, the term presents a problem. Players who would otherwise accurately define their statics or static preferences as casual during recruitment end up both mislabeling their expectations and misaligning their schedules with those goals, also that they aren't seen calling themselves casual so as not to be presumed to be bad at the game. Terms like casual, hardcore, and especially midcore, however, are nearly impossible to define and utterly meaningless in static recruitment. But simply because they exist, players would rather use them as a shorthand as opposed to more accurately defining their goals and desired play hours. These descriptors are the gaming equivalent of BizSpeak buzzwords in the corporate world, like synergy or the new normal or circle back. And we get it, your vocabulary is limited, but it doesn't have to be. Although blanket buzzwords like casual seem efficient at first, they ultimately end up confusing, potentially insulting, and completely meaningless. One only has to look at how many brain dead strats there are floating around, none of which require to use any less brain power than supposedly non-brain dead strats, to see how the community can completely eliminate the meaning of words through muddled overuse. You even see absurdities like mid-core hours, hardcore mentality in recruitment, and although hardcore progression carries with it an assumed cutting-edge ability, it is largely defined by the extraordinary amount of hours committed to prog and clear time expectations. Players who claim a so-called hardcore mentality but don't do hardcore progression aren't actually, quote, hardcore players, but instead choose to identify as such for ego purposes. In a similar way, people just don't want to self-identify as casual, even if their schedule and approach to the game definitively is, because of the negative connotations in terms of gameplay ability. It's also worth mentioning that all of this is relative. What is casual or midcore to me might not be even remotely what's casual or midcore to you, yet if you told me how much you rated and what level of success you found, and I responded that your description sounded more akin to casual gameplay, would you be offended that I didn't think you were, quote, midcore? Would me describing your efforts as, quote, casual upset you, not because of any time spent implications, but because it would seem that I was insulting your abilities as a player? My statics don't get top 10 placements in the world race, or finish in the top 10 for speeds, and I personally don't get top 10 all-star rankings on FF logs. So when it comes to prog, or speeds, or parsing, these people play the game far more than I do, either during prog or over the course of a parsing and speed partition, and they are flat out better than me at it as well. Compared to them, I'm much more casual, or midcore, or something. And if I'm casual, I hate to break it to you, but unless you're on that list I just mentioned, you're casual too. Which begs the question, why do these terms measure both time and skill? While time commitment and ability are certainly correlated in Final Fantasy XIV, this community needs to be able to better define goals, expectations, and skill level beyond lazy, nondescript buzzwords with multiple meanings. So what caused this to begin with? Well, from a static recruitment perspective, one of the main culprits is Reddit and the various recruitment discords. Now, don't get me wrong, I use these resources and they are absolutely essential to the community, but it is customary on the recruitment subreddit, for example, to post a string of bracketed keywords as a title for sorting purposes. Now, you might wonder if sorting by keyword is useful at all when the keywords themselves neither have an established nor widely accepted definition, and the keyword alone tells you neither the goals, hours, or expectations of the group itself, which are the three most important factors in static recruitment, but that's a topic for another video. The fact is, it is standard to simply tag your post as one of the three core types and move on. From a player skill level perspective, however, casual simply became a synonym for bad, and since players are unable to be as mean as they inherently want to be in party chat, they need innocent sounding synonyms to fully embody the fake nice persona of the collective Final Fantasy XIV community. And because toxicity would be incomplete if it didn't come from every possible angle, poorly skilled players who selfishly refuse to do the bare minimum required in a team-based game thus adapted the term as a calling card, claiming that they don't need to eat food or use pots or meld their gear or use mitigation tools because, after all, they identify as casual. Stereotypes then start to form, and many better players don't bother to take the time to identify the difference between a newer or lesser skilled player who simply doesn't know any better and an indignant so-called toxic casual player who is self-righteously griefing the party. When I started Final Fantasy XIV on PlayStation, I didn't know of the balance or phase temperance or optimal rotations or BIS or ACT or FF logs or the wide variety of guides available. I came from the single-player gaming world where looking at a guide was a last resort of sorts, a sign that you failed to solve the puzzle yourself, and there were absolutely no indications in Final Fantasy XIV that I was even playing incorrectly until better players finally told me. Some more skilled and more accomplished players are also incapable of realizing that there is a time and a place to be a tryhard, and that normal mode content isn't even remotely it. One of the main reasons my wife doesn't want to play the game anywhere near as much as she used to is because people in an FC we were in years ago on Genova were obnoxious to her for dying in an alliance raid of all things. So, you know, fuck you for that. All of this takes away from the fact that if you were watching this video right now, chances are you were the odd one out by even consuming such obscure content about the game. If you cap your tomes and clear the 4 Savage floors every week, and your primary reason for logging into Final Fantasy XIV is to raid, you are in the minority. It may not feel that way in Twitch chat and your Discord communities full of like-minded players, but that doesn't change the reality that most players don't even clear Savage on content, much less Ultimate. So what can we do to fix this? Well, the first thing is to not put anywhere near as much emphasis on labels and instead be much more specific in either descriptions or criticisms of both statics and players. Yes, it may take marginally more effort, but it's ultimately far more clear to those receiving the information. When recruiting players to your static, you are not semi-hardcore with mid-core hours but a hardcore mentality, okay? Instead, for example, just say your raid schedule is 4 nights a week from 8 p.m. until midnight. You expect people to show up on time with food, pots, up-to-date gear, and having studied, and that your goal is to clear the tier week 1, week 2, or whatever you choose. There's no ambiguity in that. There's no confusion. Everyone knows exactly where the team stands. At the same time, understand that not everyone plays the game the same amount, and if you primarily raid log and spend 20 plus hours a week in Savage and Ultimate fights, you are without question going to be better than someone who only logs in 3 hours a week to do a roulette or two, or who only subscribes every 4 months when a new MSQ patch drops. Their rotation is going to be wrong. They will stand in an AoE. They're going to GCD heal when an OGCD would suffice. But as long as they aren't obnoxious or unwilling to accept advice, it is genuinely not a big deal if they're at the bottom of a DPS chart in a dungeon. They are simply approaching the game as a hobby, which ultimately it is. For the vast majority of us, even those at the higher end, Final Fantasy XIV is just a game, the entire point of which is escapist fun and enjoyment. If someone wants to approach a hobby casually, there's no need to gatekeep them from doing so, and at no point are your accomplishments as a high-end player defined or illuminated by punching down. No matter how good you are, there is always someone better than you, and it is both humbling and inspiring to remember that. Effective communication in an MMORPG is absolutely essential, whether it is during static recruitment or between players of different skill levels. As players, we do a marker dance or read a macro before every fight. We join discords to look up gear sets, aggregate strats, and talk to each other in voice. We spend inordinate amounts of time in and out of game talking to each other about the game, both because we love it and because that is how MMORPGs like Final Fantasy XIV are designed to be played. The community is what makes the game special, regardless of the transgressions of individuals in that community. And by communicating more specifically and intentionally, you not only become a better member of that community, but the community itself is improved as a whole. Speaking of community, make sure you join mine by clicking the subscribe button below. I'll be making videos about healing, raiding, and deep dives into topics like this, and I even have a poll up right now for you to help choose the direction of my future content. As always, guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the tremendous support everyone has given me. Take care.